Princess Royal is a British dynastic title usually held by the eldest daughter of the British monarch. The title is given by the monarch himself for life, it is not hereditary, and cannot be held by more than one person at the same time. In 1642, the title was first borne by Princess Mary, the daughter of Charles I of England. His wife, Henrietta Maria of France, had invented the title following the French custom of giving the eldest daughter of the French king the title Madame Royale. To date, 7 different individuals have held the title. The current Princess Royal is Anne Mountbatten-Windsor, the only daughter of the recently deceased Queen Elizabeth II. The title of Princess Royal is given for life, even if the carrier outlives her parents. Mary, Princess Royal. Mary Henrietta Stuart was born on November 4, 1631 at St. James's Palace in London. She was the eldest daughter of Charles I of England and his queen Henrietta Maria. Mary was the first daughter of a British ruler to hold the title of Princess Royal. Mary received a French-influenced upbringing from Lady Jean Kerr, Countess of Roxburgh, but her father prevented her from being brought up as a Catholic, which was what her Catholic mother actually wanted. On May 2, 1641, at the age of 9, she married the 15-year-old William II of Orange in the Royal Chapel at Whitehall Palace in London. But the marriage was not consummated until several years later, given the bride's young age. The marriage was agreed upon as part of an alliance between Great Britain and the United Provinces of the Netherlands. Negotiations for the marriage had begun in 1640, and according to the marriage contract, Mary did not have to live with her husband until she was 12 years old. But she left England as early as 1642 because of the troubled political situation. Mary had a tense relationship with her mother-in-law, Amalia of Solms-Braunfels, but got on well with her aunt Elizabeth Stuart, who lived in the Netherlands from 1621 to 1661. During the English Civil War, many English exiled royalists came to Mary for support, which further complicated the relationship between Mary and her mother-in-law. Mary had issues conceiving, which was cause for more court gossip. Mary's husband, William II, died of smallpox on November 6, 1650, just over a week before the couple's only son was born. Mary and her mother-in-law argued about the newborn's name. The name dispute was won by the mother-in-law, the child was baptized William, and Mary therefore did not appear at the baptism. Due to ongoing arguments with her mother-in-law, Mary spent much of her time away from court. From 1656 to 1657, she visited her mother at the French court. In her husband's will, she had been appointed Lord of the Principality of Orange, but had been denied the right to exercise the office by her mother-in-law. In 1656, she sought the support of Louis XIV, and with the aid of the Sun King, she was finally recognized as Regent of Orange in 1658. The intervention of Louis XIV didn't make Mary loved in the Netherlands. Her refusal to learn to speak Dutch and the fact that she surrounded herself with an English court didn't do her any additional favors. In 1660, she returned to England after her brother Charles II's accession. There, she contracted smallpox and Mary Henrietta Stuart died at Whitehall Palace on December 24, 1660. She was buried in Westminster Abbey. Anne, Princess Royal. Anne was born on November 2, 1709 in Hanover as the second child and eldest daughter of King George II of Great Britain and Caroline of Ansbach. Anne's father became king in 1727, and as she was the monarch's eldest daughter, she was given the title Princess Royal. Anne was close to her mother, but not to her father, and like her parents had a poor relationship with her brother Frederick, Prince of Wales and heir to the throne. Anne was an intelligent child, a gifted musician, and an avid reader. She was brought up by a governess, Jane Temple, and was a pupil of the composer George Frederick Handel, whose support she continued to have throughout her life. Anne was not considered outwardly attractive and was said to have a long pockmarked face with protruding eyes. When the time came for Anne to marry, there weren't many marriage candidates in Europe, partly because she had to marry a Protestant, and partly because only a monarch or a successor to a throne was considered acceptable in terms of status, which greatly reduced the choices available for Anne. William IV of Orange was the only acceptable candidate available. He was described to Anne as repulsively unattractive, but she insisted on the marriage, reportedly simply because she wanted to marry, as she wanted to avoid living a life as a spinster at her father's and then her brother's court. Thus, Anne married Prince William IV of Orange at St. James's in London on March 25, 1734. Upon her arrival in the Netherlands, Anne settled with William in the Oranien Palace in Leeuwarden. She was not popular in her new country, as she was perceived as haughty and made it too clear that she considered Great Britain to be superior to the Netherlands. Anne isolated herself with her music and literature and reportedly treated her court officials with disrespect. She also didn't get along with her mother-in-law, Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel. Anne felt homesick and, mistakenly believing she was expecting her first child the summer after her marriage, made a highly controversial visit to Great Britain without her husband to have the baby born there, with the idea that it had a place in the British succession after her. This led to a conflict with both her father and her husband, and she was forced to return to the Netherlands against her will. Eventually, however, she developed a harmonious friendship with her husband. In 1747, William became stadholder of the Netherlands. Anne acted as William's political advisor from the start, openly attending council meetings and acting as an intermediary between Great Britain and the Netherlands. On October 2, 1751, Anne's husband died. He was succeeded by their 3-year-old son, William V of Orange. As his guardian, Anne became regent of the Netherlands until the day he came of age. Anne was an effective and authoritative politician. At first, she was appreciated for her efficiency, but as her domestic and foreign policies met with strong opposition, she came to be seen as a tyrant. Anne died of dropsy on January 12, 1759 in The Hague in the Netherlands. Her mother-in-law took over as regent until she died in 1765, after which Anne's daughter Caroline took over until 1766, when William V became of age. Charlotte, Princess Royal. Charlotte was born at Buckingham House in London on September 29, 1766. She was the eldest daughter of King George III and Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. As daughter of the king, she became the third princess to be granted the title Princess Royal in 1789. Like her siblings, Charlotte was taught by private tutors and spent most of her childhood at Buckingham House, Kew Palace and Windsor Castle. On May 18, 1797, Charlotte married hereditary Prince Frederick, the eldest son of Duke Frederick Eugenius of Württemberg and Frederica Dorothea Sophia of Brandenburg-Schwedt. Frederick succeeded his father as Frederick I of Württemberg in December 1797. He already had 2 sons and 2 daughters from his first marriage to Augusta of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel. The new union produced 1 child, a stillborn daughter, in 1798. When Württemberg was occupied by the French army in 1800, Charlotte and Frederick were forced to flee to Vienna. Frederick managed to negotiate a peace treaty with France the following year and assumed the title of Elector of Württemberg in 1803. A few years later, he changed the title to King of Württemberg, thus making Charlotte queen. Because of his peace with France, Frederick found himself in opposition to his father-in-law, the English King George III. In 1813, Frederick turned against France, and after the fall of Napoleon, Frederick retained his kingship over Württemberg. After her husband's death in 1816, the Dowager Queen Charlotte continued to live at the Ludwigsburg Palace. She became godmother to Princess Victoria of Kent, the future Queen Victoria, in 1819. Charlotte died on October 5, 1828 at Ludwigsburg Palace and was buried in the crypt there at her husband's side. Victoria, Princess Royal. Victoria Adelaide Mary Louisa of Great Britain and Ireland was born on November 21, 1840 at Buckingham Palace in London. She was the eldest child of Queen Victoria of Great Britain and Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, and was born just 9.5 months after her parents' wedding. When she was born, the doctor exclaimed sadly, "Oh, madame, it's a girl." The queen replied, "Never mind, next time it will be a prince." On January 19, 1841, Victoria was granted the title of Princess Royal. Victoria and her siblings were brought up largely at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, as their parents felt that children should be kept away from court. Until her brother's birth in 1841, she was the heir to the British throne, and her mother believed she should receive a broad education. Victoria was richly talented and intelligent, and spoke Greek, German, and Latin. On January 25, 1858, she married Prince Frederick of Prussia, the future Frederick III of Germany. Frederick and Victoria had first met in 1851, and their parents both felt that a marriage between them would be beneficial, as the royal families of Britain and Prussia had close ties. Although the wedding was unpopular in the British press, in Prussia it was met with approval in the liberal press, and, for that very reason, it was met with hesitation at court. Victoria's husband became first in line to the throne when her father-in-law, William I, became King of Prussia in 1861. As a liberal, Victoria believed that Germany should become a constitutional monarchy following the British model. She came to exert a strong influence over her husband, but her attempts to change the system failed, as her father-in-law, William I, was completely under the influence of Otto von Bismarck. In 1862, Victoria unsuccessfully tried to persuade her husband to accept her father's proposal to abdicate and ascend the throne himself. Victoria's liberal views made her disliked at the Prussian court, and Victoria received constant criticism for being too English. During the Franco-German War, she devoted herself to medical care for the wounded, but was not praised for it, as she was regarded as intruding on the Queen's duties. Frederick ascended the throne on March 9, 1888, by which time he was already dying of cancer, and Victoria was empress for only 3 months until her husband's death on June 15 of that same year. Her relationship with her son, William II, had been strained by the harsh upbringing she had forced him to undergo, and it worsened by William's ruthlessness and brutal behavior towards his mother upon his accession to the throne. As a widow, Victoria retired to the Friedrichshof Palace in Hessen-Nassau. She often criticized her son's conservative politics, and he kept her out of the public eye and forbade her to partake in purely representative duties. Victoria was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1898 and died on August 5, 1901 at Friedrichshof. Her many letters to her mother, describing life at the German court between 1858 and 1900, were published in 1929. Louise, Princess Royal. Louise Victoria Alexandra Dagmar was born on February 20, 1867 at Marlborough House in London. She was the eldest daughter of King Edward VII and his wife Alexandra, and was granted the title of Princess Royal in 1905. Louise spent much of her childhood at Marlborough House, as well as at her parents' country home, Sandringham House. Like her sisters Victoria and Maud, Louise received little formal education. On June 27, 1889, Louise married the 18 years older Alexander Duff, Earl of Fife at Buckingham Palace. 2 days after their wedding, Queen Victoria granted Alexander the title of Duke of Fife and Marquess of Macduff. 3 children were born to the marriage of Louise and Alexander: Alastair, who was born and died on the same day, Alexandra, the second Duchess of Fife, and Maud, Countess of Southesk. On November 9, 1905, King Edward VII granted his daughter Louise the title of Princess Royal. In December 1911, Louise and her family were shipwrecked off the coast of Morocco while sailing to Egypt. They all remained unharmed, but Louise's husband developed lung disease and died in Aswan, Egypt in January 1912. Louise herself died in her sleep on January 4, 1931 at her home in Portman Square, London. She is buried in Aberdeenshire. Mary, Princess Royal. Victoria Alexandra Alice Mary Windsor was born on April 25, 1897 at Sandringham House. She was the third child and only daughter of the later King George V and the later Queen Mary. At the time of her birth, Mary was fifth in line to the succession after her grandfather Edward, her father George, and her brothers Edward and Albert. Mary was taught by a governess and she became fluent in German and French and developed a passion for horses that she would maintain throughout her life. Her first official appearance was at her parents' coronation as King George V and Queen Mary in 1911. During World War I, Princess Mary visited hospitals with her mother. She had her own war charity called the Princess Mary's Christmas Gift Fund, which gave gifts to British soldiers and sailors during Christmas of 1914. Furthermore, she took a nursing course in 1918 and went to work in a hospital. Mary married Henry V Lascelles at Westminster Abbey on February 28, 1922. The newlyweds settled in Yorkshire and had 2 sons, George Henry Hubert Lascelles and Gerald David Lascelles. In 1931, King George V granted his only daughter the title of Princess Royal. Mary was very close with her eldest brother Edward, the later King Edward VIII, who was called David within his family. After the crisis surrounding his abdication in December 1936, Mary remained close to David, and in 1947 she refused to attend the wedding of her niece Elizabeth to Philip Mountbatten because her brother was not invited. Mary and David remained close their entire lives. Mary's husband died in 1947. She herself continued to fulfill official duties at home and abroad. For example, she was present on behalf of the Queen at the independence celebrations of Trinidad and Tobago in 1962 and Zambia in 1964. One of her last official appearances was at the funeral of Queen Louise of Sweden in 1965, where she attended on behalf of the Queen. The Princess Royal suffered a fatal heart attack that same year and died on March 28, 1965. She was buried alongside her husband at the All Saints' Church in Harewood, West Yorkshire. Anne, Princess Royal. Anne was born on August 15, 1950, as the second child and only daughter of Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. She received the title of Princess Royal in 1987. As a child, Anne first received private lessons at Buckingham Palace and then attended a boarding school in Kent. As an equestrian, she competed in the 1976 Summer Olympics. Since 1988, she has been a member of the International Olympic Committee. Princess Anne married Mark Phillips on November 14, 1973. The couple has 2 children, Peter Phillips and Zara Phillips. The couple divorced in 1992. On December 12th of that same year, Anne married Tim Lawrence. The couple have no children together. Thank you for watching.